When Japanese soldiers defended the islands of the Pacific in 1942, they carried a rifle that traced its lineage back to the 1890s. The Type 38 Arisaka, designed in 1905 and refined through decades of combat, remained the standard-issue weapon for imperial forces. Meanwhile, their American adversaries wielded the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic marvel that military analysts called the finest battle rifle ever made. On paper, this was no contest. The American rifle fired as fast as you could pull the trigger, held 8 rounds that ejected automatically when empty, and represented the cutting edge of infantry weapons technology. Yet, Japanese soldiers who captured American weapons on Pacific battlefields frequently examined them with curiosity, then returned to their Arisakas. This wasn't blind nationalism or technological ignorance. It was battlefield pragmatism born from understanding what actually mattered in jungle warfare. The Arisaka story begins in the 1890s when Japan, rapidly modernizing after centuries of isolation, recognized they needed a rifle that could compete with Western powers. Colonel Nariakira Arisaka led the design team that created a bolt-action rifle incorporating the best features of European designs while addressing Japan's specific needs. The Type 38, chambered in 6.5 by 50 mm, emerged in 1905 and saw service through the Russo-Japanese War, countless border conflicts, and eventually the Pacific War. What made this rifle endure wasn't revolutionary engineering, but rather practical design choices that prioritized reliability, economy, and suitability for smaller-statured soldiers. Standard American military thinking emphasized firepower and technological superiority. The M1 Garand represented this philosophy perfectly, a semi-automatic rifle that could overwhelm opponents with volume of fire. The weapon was heavy, complex, and required significant industrial capacity to manufacture. Each Garand contained over 50 precision machined parts working in careful synchronization. The Japanese took a different approach with the Arisaka. They created a rifle so simple that field stripping required no tools and could be taught in minutes. They designed it to function with minimal maintenance in conditions where American weapons would fail. This seemed backwards to Western military observers, but it proved prescient when the reality of island warfare emerged after 1941. The rifle's bolt design was conventional, a straightforward two-lug front-locking system similar to the Mauser pattern. There was nothing innovative here, nothing that would impress firearms engineers. But that simplicity meant fewer parts to break, fewer things to go wrong when covered in coral dust, saltwater, or jungle mud. Critics argued the Arisaka would never match the firepower of semi-automatic weapons. They were right about raw firing rate, but battlefields aren't firing ranges, and the Arisaka's design brought advantages that mattered more than theoretical rates of fire. The lightweight 6.5 mm cartridge produced minimal recoil, allowing even small-statured soldiers to fire accurately under rapid conditions. The long barrel gave excellent velocity and flat trajectory. By American standards, the rifle seemed underpowered. By Japanese standards, it was perfectly adequate for the ranges where jungle fighting actually occurred, and its mild recoil meant soldiers could make accurate follow-up shots faster than Americans struggling with the Garand's heavier .30-06 kick. Japanese military training emphasized marksmanship and ammunition conservation in ways that seemed obsessive to American observers. Every soldier spent weeks mastering the fundamentals: breath control, trigger squeeze, sight picture. The Imperial Army couldn't match American industrial output, so they compensated with training that made every shot count. Private First Class Tomiko Nakamura, who fought on Guadalcanal, kept a diary that American forces later captured. Her entries described training exercises where recruits fired 10 rounds at various distances, then retrieved and examined their targets. Any soldier who wasted ammunition through poor technique faced immediate punishment. This wasn't cruelty, it was recognition that Japan's limited industrial base couldn't sustain the ammunition expenditure that American forces took for granted. The Arisaka's bolt action forced deliberate shooting. You couldn't spray rounds downrange hoping to hit something. Each shot required working the bolt, chambering a new round, reacquiring your target. This matched Japanese tactical doctrine perfectly. While Americans relied on overwhelming firepower, Japanese infantry emphasized concealment, patience, and precisely aimed fire. On Peleliu in September 1944, Marine Corporal Rachel Morrison described her squad's encounter with Japanese defenders. Her unit advanced through coral ridges, taking fire from positions they couldn't see. The incoming rounds weren't a continuous stream like German MG-42 fire or even the rapid semi-automatic fire of other defenders. Instead, single shots came from multiple directions, each one carefully placed. Morrison wrote that the Japanese fired like they were hunting deer, not fighting a war. One shot, then silence, then another shot from somewhere else made it impossible to locate them. This tactical approach exploited the Arisaka's strengths. The rifle was exceptionally accurate at ranges up to 500 yards. Its mild recoil allowed rapid target reacquisition without losing sight picture. The long barrel provided excellent velocity, making trajectory predictable. Japanese soldiers trained to estimate range by eye and adjust their sights accordingly could consistently hit man-sized targets at distances where American troops still struggled to locate the shooter. The Pacific Theater was a gunsmith's nightmare. Salt air corroded metal within hours. Humidity kept everything perpetually damp. Sand from coral beaches worked into mechanisms like grinding compound. American forces soon learned that the M1 Garand, magnificent on the rifle range, became temperamental in tropical conditions. The gas operating system that enabled semi-automatic fire required careful maintenance. If the gas port clogged, and it frequently did, the rifle became a single-shot weapon. If the operating rod bent even slightly from impact, the action would bind. If moisture got into the ammunition, the reduced gas pressure from weak rounds wouldn't cycle the action properly. Japanese armorers anticipated these problems. The Arisaka's bolt action had no gas system to clog, no operating rod to bend, no complex timing to get disrupted by fouled parts. You manually cycled the action regardless of ammunition quality or weapon condition. The rifle functioned in conditions that reduced American semi-automatics to expensive clubs. Sergeant First Class Yuki Tanaka, who survived the fighting on Tarawa, described in post-war interviews how her rifle spent 3 days submerged in seawater during the battle. When American forces finally overran her position, she was captured alive. The Marine lieutenant who processed her, Captain Jennifer Hughes, noted in her report that the Japanese sergeant's rifle was encrusted with coral sand and salt, yet still functioned when test-fired. Hughes wrote, "The bolt was stiff and gritty, but it opened and closed. We found a captured M1 in similar condition that wouldn't cycle at all." The simplicity extended to maintenance. American soldiers carried cleaning kits with multiple brushes, patches, oil, and specialized tools. The Arisaka's cleaning kit fit inside the buttstock, a sectional cleaning rod, a small bottle of oil, and a pull-through cord. Japanese soldiers could field strip and clean their rifles in darkness using only their hands. Private Keiko Yamamoto, captured on Saipan in July 1944, demonstrated this for her captors. Blindfolded, she disassembled her Arisaka, cleaned each component, and reassembled it in under 4 minutes. The American intelligence officer observing, Major Patricia Anderson, tried the same with an M1 Garand. She managed disassembly but couldn't reassemble it blindfolded without mixing up small parts. This maintenance simplicity mattered strategically. Japanese forces in the Pacific often operated without supply lines, cut off on isolated islands or in jungle positions. They couldn't requisite spare parts or rely on armorers for repairs. Soldiers needed weapons they could maintain themselves with minimal tools and materials. The Arisaka delivered exactly that. Its simple bolt design meant fewer parts to break. Its robust construction meant parts rarely broke anyway. When something did fail, field-expedient repairs often sufficed to keep the rifle functional. Magazine capacity was the one area where the Arisaka clearly fell behind. The Type 38 held 5 rounds in an internal magazine fed from stripper clips, same as the German Mauser or British Lee Enfield. The M1 Garand held 8 rounds in an N-block clip that ejected automatically when empty. American soldiers could reload faster and sustain higher rates of fire. Japanese tactical doctrine accounted for this disadvantage through different means. Rather than winning firefights through volume of fire, Japanese forces emphasized surprise, concealment, and night attacks where American firepower advantages diminished. The famous banzai charges that captured American attention weren't the norm, they were desperate final measures. Standard Japanese tactics involved careful positioning, camouflage, and disciplined fire control. Lieutenant Colonel Akira Sato commanded a company on New Guinea through 1943. Her after-action reports, captured when Australian forces overran her position, detailed the tactical philosophy. She wrote that her soldiers were instructed never to fire unless they had clear targets at ranges where they could ensure hits. The Americans rely on their automatic weapons to spray bullets and hope to hit us. We rely on patience and accuracy. Their way requires endless ammunition. Our way requires discipline. This approach let Japanese forces remain combat effective even when outnumbered and outgunned. The weight difference between rifles revealed different military philosophies. The M1 Garand weighed 9.5 pounds empty, plus the weight of ammunition and equipment. The Type 38 Arisaka weighed 8.5 pounds with its distinctive long barrel. That pound difference seems trivial until you're carrying it through jungle terrain in 90-degree heat with 100% humidity. Japanese soldiers, generally smaller in stature than Americans, found the lighter rifle easier to handle during hours-long marches through dense vegetation. Corporal Hiromi Fujita, captured on Iwo Jima in February 1945, told interrogators through her translator about examining a captured M1 Garand. She'd found one abandoned by a wounded Marine and tried to carry it back to her position. After 200 yards climbing volcanic slopes, she left it behind and retrieved her Arisaka. "Too heavy," she said simply. "Good weapon for Americans who have trucks to carry everything. We walk everywhere. Every pound matters." The long barrel that made the Type 38 seem unwieldy actually provided advantages in jungle warfare. The additional length gave excellent velocity and accuracy, while the extended sight radius made precise shooting easier. Japanese soldiers learned to use the long rifle as a probe when moving through dense vegetation, feeling ahead for trip wires or obstacles. The robust construction meant the rifle could take abuse that would damage the more complex M1. Australian forces fighting in New Guinea encountered Japanese defenders who'd been in the jungle for months without resupply. Captain Elizabeth MacArthur led a patrol that discovered an abandoned Japanese position in October 1943. Among the equipment left behind were 3 Arisaka rifles that showed obvious signs of hard use, stock scratched and discolored, metal worn and dirty. MacArthur's sergeant, Angela Chen, test-fired each rifle. All 3 functioned perfectly despite their condition. Chen noted in her report, "These weapons have been through hell and still work. We found 2 Australian rifles in similar condition last month that were barely functional." The cultural dimension of Japanese rifle preference ran deeper than mechanical considerations. The Arisaka wasn't just a tool, it represented the soldier's connection to their nation and emperor. Each rifle bore the imperial chrysanthemum on the receiver, marking it as property of the emperor. Soldiers were taught that losing or damaging their rifle through negligence was an unforgivable offense, almost sacrilegious. This cultural weight meant Japanese soldiers maintained their weapons with near-religious devotion. American observers sometimes mistook this for primitive superstition, but it served practical military purposes. Soldiers who viewed their rifles as sacred trusts took exceptional care of them. Rifles that received fanatical maintenance remained functional longer. Private Michiko Sasaki, captured on Okinawa in April 1945, still had her rifle when taken prisoner. American intelligence officers noted the weapon was in better condition than many American rifles they'd seen, despite Sasaki having fought for 3 months in muddy foxholes under constant artillery bombardment. When asked how she maintained it, Sasaki explained through a translator that she cleaned her rifle every night before sleeping, no matter how exhausted she was. Chinese soldiers who fought Japanese forces in mainland campaigns from 1937 onward developed healthy respect for the Arisaka's effectiveness. Captain Liu Meiling, commanding a company of nationalist troops, wrote in her 1939 report about fighting near Changsha. Her forces had captured numerous Japanese rifles and distributed them to soldiers whose own weapons were worn out. Liu noted that Chinese soldiers issued Arisakas consistently outperformed those with locally manufactured copies of Mauser designs. The Japanese rifle is simple and reliable. Our copies are neither, she wrote. In battles lasting days where cleaning is impossible, the Japanese rifles continue functioning while ours fail. The Soviet-Japanese border conflicts of 1939 provided another perspective. Soviet forces used Mosin-Nagant rifles, rugged bolt actions similar in concept to the Arisaka but chambered from more powerful cartridges. Major Svetlana Volkov commanded a rifle company during fighting near Kokhin-Gol. Her memoirs, published decades later, described recovering Japanese weapons after successful engagements. Volkov noted that while Soviet doctrine emphasized the Mosin-Nagant's stopping power, Japanese rifles showed superior resistance to the dusty conditions of the Mongolian steppe. Our weapons required constant cleaning to prevent jamming. The Japanese rifles seemed to function regardless of dust accumulation, she wrote. British Commonwealth forces in Burma faced Japanese defenders throughout 1944 and 1945. Sergeant Martha Pemberton of the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry kept detailed notes that survived the war. She described her company's encounter with Japanese positions along the Irrawaddy River in February 1945. British forces were equipped with the Lee Enfield, itself a proven bolt-action design. After overrunning Japanese positions, Pemberton's squad examined captured Arisakas with professional interest. She wrote that the Japanese rifles showed obvious wear but remained functional. Their bolts are smooth, their barrels clean despite impossible conditions. They maintain these weapons better than we maintain ours, and we have proper facilities and supplies. The M1 Garand's technological superiority came with hidden costs that only emerged during sustained combat. The semi-automatic action required specific maintenance that exhausted, stressed soldiers sometimes couldn't provide. The gas system needed regular cleaning, or carbon buildup would cause malfunctions. The operating rod could bend if the rifle was dropped or used to club someone. The N-block clip made a distinctive ping when ejected after the 8th round, potentially alerting enemies that the shooter was empty. Japanese forces learned to listen for that ping. Sergeant Naomi Ishikawa described this tactic in her post-war testimony. Her squad would wait during firefights, counting American shots. When they heard the distinctive clip ejection sound, they knew those soldiers were reloading. That brief window, perhaps 2 seconds, was when Japanese soldiers would fire or advance. The American rifle's noise told us when they were vulnerable, Ishikawa explained. The Arisaka made no such betraying sound. A Japanese soldier who ran their magazine empty simply fed another stripper clip or single rounds as quietly as working the bolt. The ammunition logistics favored simplicity over sophistication. American forces required consistent, high-quality ammunition for the M1 to function reliably. Weak rounds wouldn't generate enough gas pressure to cycle the action. Overpressure rounds could bend the operating rod. The N-block clips themselves could become damaged, causing feeding failures. Japanese forces using bolt actions could fire virtually any ammunition that chambered. Weak rounds, old ammunition, captured enemy rounds, if the cartridge fit, the Arisaka would fire it. This flexibility proved crucial for forces often cut off from supply lines. Lieutenant Sumiko Watanabe, captured on Guam in August 1944, told American interrogators about ammunition shortages her unit faced. Cut off from resupply for 2 months, they'd scavenged cartridges wherever possible. Some ammunition was decades old, pulled from storage in Manchuria. Some came from destroyed supply dumps exposed to the elements. Some was battlefield recovery from damaged cases. Watanabe stated that roughly 30% of their ammunition would likely have caused malfunctions in gas-operated weapons, but functioned adequately in bolt actions where the shooter manually cycled each round. The industrial economics told a revealing story. America produced approximately 5.5 million M1 Garand rifles during World War II, an impressive feat requiring massive industrial capacity, precision machine tools, and skilled workers. Each rifle took approximately 5 hours of machine time to manufacture, used high-quality steel, and required careful quality control to ensure the complex action functioned properly. Japan produced roughly 6 million Arisaka rifles across all variants from 1905 to 1945, using simpler tooling and less sophisticated manufacturing processes. Each rifle took approximately 3 hours of machine time. The manufacturing process used lower-grade steel than American weapons but compensated through heat treatment and design features that distributed stress effectively. During the war, when industrial capacity determined military strength, the Arisaka's simpler construction became strategic advantage. Japan couldn't match American industrial might, but they could produce adequate weapons in numbers sufficient to arm their forces. The quality control differences emerged in captured weapons. American armorers examining Japanese rifles noted wide variation in finish quality and precision. Early war Arisakas showed careful manufacturing and good materials. Late war rifles became progressively cruder, with rougher finishes, substituted materials, and visible machine marks. Yet even the crudest late war Arisaka remained functional. The design's simplicity meant it could tolerate manufacturing shortcuts that would cripple more complex weapons. Colonel Barbara Freeman, an American ordnance officer who evaluated captured Japanese weapons in 1945, wrote in her report, "The Japanese rifle's beauty is in its forgiveness. The design tolerates poor materials, rough manufacturing, and minimal maintenance while remaining combat effective." The M1 is unquestionably superior when maintained properly, but requires careful handling that combat conditions don't always allow. The Arisaka's service life extended far beyond Japan's defeat. After 1945, these rifles armed forces across Asia. Chinese Communist forces used captured Arisakas throughout their civil war and into the Korean conflict. Vietnamese forces fighting French colonial troops relied heavily on Japanese rifles abandoned after 1945. Indonesian independence fighters carried Arisakas against Dutch forces. The rifle saw combat in virtually every Asian conflict through the 1950s and into the 1960s. This longevity wasn't accident or lack of alternatives. Armed groups that acquired more modern weapons often kept their Arisakas as primary arms because they worked reliably under conditions that defeated more sophisticated weapons. Vietnamese forces fighting in jungles and rice paddies found the simple bolt action more dependable than semi-automatic rifles that required constant maintenance. The M1 Garand, despite its technical excellence, was largely replaced by the M14 within 15 years of World War II's end. The M14 itself gave way to the M16 within another decade. Each generation of American rifle brought greater sophistication and greater complexity. Each also brought new maintenance challenges and different failure modes. Modern military analysts studying World War II Pacific campaigns consistently note that Japanese defensive effectiveness exceeded what raw firepower comparisons suggested possible. Forces armed with bolt-action rifles held islands for months against attackers with semi-automatic weapons, submachine guns, and overwhelming fire support. Part of this effectiveness came from terrain and fortifications, but part came from having weapons perfectly suited to the conditions they faced. The Arisaka represented a philosophy that adequate weapons, reliable and simple, outperform sophisticated weapons that require careful maintenance and ideal conditions. Japanese forces couldn't match American industrial output or technological sophistication, so they built weapons that maximized their advantages: discipline, training, and adaptation to harsh environments. The rifle embodied this pragmatic approach, conventional in design, unimpressive in specifications, but superbly effective at the fundamental task of remaining functional when everything else had failed. The Pacific War proved that the best weapon isn't always the newest or most advanced. Sometimes it's the one that keeps working when you can't clean it properly, when ammunition quality varies, when you've been in combat for weeks without rest. The Arisaka was that weapon for Japanese forces, a testament to the enduring value of simplicity, reliability, and design choices prioritizing what soldiers actually need over what engineers think sounds impressive. The American soldiers' confusion at Japanese preference for their outdated rifles over captured M1 Garands wasn't stubbornness. It was wisdom earned through understanding that technology serves the soldier, not the reverse.